Generally, you should be familiar with what you're teaching before you teach it. Now, that's a bit of a loaded gun, I suppose. I have a degree in post-secondary workforce education. I actually have 2 degrees in that. So on paper, technically, I can teach anything. I can teach airplane mechanics and human resources people. I can teach chefs. I mean, on paper, I can teach anything. Now, can I really teach anything? Of course not. But the degree means one thing and actual life experience means another. When I was in school, I was with people from all different backgrounds. And one of the really neat things about this, besides getting to know all these people from various industries, was that the one thing you learn really quickly when you're dealing with people from all these different backgrounds is that you know what's best for your profession. So for example, I know that if I'm going to teach you how to run a ventilator, I probably can't do it on a 100% online course. I probably need to have you in person and do some labs, some hands-on stuff. So the type of media and the type of teaching, your style, truly depends on the occupation that you're teaching for, or the class type in general. Case in point, had this been up to me, I've said this over and over and over, but this particular course would not have been online. So the style and the tools you use should definitely work with your profession and what your students need. To choose the material, the very first thing you have to do is think about who is learning. In our case, we're usually teaching adults, but what if you were teaching a child something simple, maybe how to use an MDI? You would use different materials than if you were working with an adult. Now, we've talked about this extensively before, so I won't go into it again. Just most of you probably wouldn't appreciate it if I had wheeled a puppet show into the classroom while you were getting your associate degree. So there's that. You also have to take into consideration what media is available to you. Print media is generally always available. Books are always available. There's also often audio available. Think about when you were learning how to identify different breath sounds. You could use audio to do that. And of course online now there's way more online media than we had when I was in school. So there's that. Also think about the characteristics of the media that you are using to give the course or give the learning, distribute the learning to the learner. You use different things for an online class than you do an in-person class, than you do at the bedside. And then figure out what characteristics you want to be achieved. If you're teaching a psychomotor skill, how to run a ventilator, for example, you probably need a ventilator there. And part of the task would be, for you as an instructor, obtaining a ventilator. You have to have access to one, you have to have compressed gas to run it, all that kind of stuff. There are 3 major things you think about when you're deciding which material to use. That is the delivery system. Is it in person or is it online? Is it a hybrid course? Is it a course that takes place over the standard 16 weeks? Is it a 6-month course? Is it a 2-week course? Think about what content you want to cover. And this can be anywhere from a single lesson to an entire program. And then how you want to present it and how you need to present it. We'll go back to the ventilator again. You probably need to present how to run a ventilator class during a lab period in person, as opposed to trying to walk through it only in lecture. Now you may want to use a combination of both, but you probably need that hands-on part. All right, printed materials are what we have most commonly used. And you could almost use, put web pages in this box with some variation. But this is flat printed material, books, handouts, pamphlets. That's typically what printed materials are. Now, if you've got a web page that hasn't changed at all in the last 5 years, then that's as good as a book, because books get printed every few years, and so there is a time frame. You hopefully won't have expired or bad or old information. So the advantages are that they are always available. You can always find a book, and whether it's the book you want is different. But the same thing with a web page these days. You can always find a web page. Whether it's a good one or not is a totally different topic. The advantages is that the reader or the learner is really more in control to some extent. I mean, I give you a lesson. I say this week we're going to go through chapter 12. Then you're in control of how quickly or slowly you read chapter 12, so long as you get it done in the time that I have prescribed in a week. You can lay out very concisely what you want people to do. You can say, I want you to read pages 10 through 12, and I want you to answer the questions at the end of the chapter. You can be pretty specific. You can reinforce ideas that you go over in class, and hopefully you're not having people read things that don't match up with what you're doing. And the nice thing too is that you always have this. This is available, and you can, you tuck a book in your bag, and you can always go back and reread it. The disadvantages are primarily that, again, you may have old information that's out of date, and if you have a student who doesn't read well, then this could pose a challenge, particularly if you're under some sort of time frame. If you are relying solely on this printed material for education, particularly in a profession or vocation where there's a lot of technical jargon or overwhelming procedural stuff, then just using the book alone is probably going to discourage a student. And you got to be able to get a hold of it. If someone doesn't have a computer, then having them access a web page is not an appropriate task to assign. Demonstration materials, they call them manipulatives if you're in the K through 12 world, and there's some people who really think very highly of manipulatives, and there are various types. If you're in kindergarten and you're teaching kids colors, then having flashcards or blocks or different items that are a specific color can be pretty darn handy. If you're teaching them to count, then there's often blocks, and they actually make special educational block sets just for this. Maybe a set of blocks that have the numbers printed on them, or dots that coincide with the number represented, that kind of thing. So it gives the student an opportunity to manipulate something with their hands, see it visually. Perhaps it may be appropriate to smell it or feel it. I mean, if you're talking about an animal and you want to feel the different types of fur, then it's appropriate to feel. If you are teaching a culinary cooking class, then certainly smelling is important. So it helps people process in different ways other than simply reading and listening. So it's kind of cool. It tends to be a little more fun and more interactive, and so you can play around with it. Now there's disadvantages to that too. You can only play the same game so many times before it's not fun anymore. I mean, we can only play tic-tac-toe about 1,000 times before we don't want to play anymore. And the same goes with these manipulative materials. They're hard, solid pieces of material that don't change. That set of blocks is always going to be red, blue, and yellow. It's always going to have the numbers 1, 2, and 3 printed on it. So there'll come a point when it's not fun to play with anymore. There are some teachers who depend on them very heavily, and we don't have this problem so much in higher education, but it is certainly something that happens in lower education, especially primary education. If you've got a student who is visually impaired, then obviously you should think twice about using these, or obtain materials that were created specifically for people with visual impairments. And if you have a really big class unless you have enough stuff to go around, it's no fun. I don't know about you guys, but when I was in A&P class, we had a box of bones, like real bones, a real human skeleton that we got to lay out, and it was a little creepy because we were told some Indian family basically sold their grandmother's body, but there were probably 10 skeletons. So if you had more than about 3 people in a group, it was no fun anymore. So if you had 3 people in a group, 10 skeletons, then any class over 30 people, it was an impractical activity. Projected learning is pretty much exactly what you are witnessing right this very second. It can be used in large groups. If you're going to the AARC conference, then chances are you'll sit through a presentation or two where they're using a PowerPoint presentation in a huge room full of people. That is projected learning. It can be really great if you have a huge group of people, but you can't really teach anything too specific. I mean, figuring out if each and every person in the room learned something can be a challenge. It also is hard to change. I mean, you have all now made these presentations, you've all converted them to video, you've all uploaded them, and if you're like me, as soon as you upload it and it's stuck up there, you realize that you had a typo in a slide, or you don't like the way your voice sounded, or there was some background noise, something, and you wish you could do it again, but changing it is like not worth it. And don't think I don't realize this. So when you have some of those minor little quirks in your presentation, I do take that into account. So it can be challenging. At one point, it was really expensive to do this kind of stuff. It's certainly more affordable than it used to be, but you do need a computer, you need cameras, you need microphones, you need the ability to record things. And the last 2 computers I've had were the first ones that were readily equipped with some of this stuff. Before that, you had to add everything in separate. You know, your microphone went into a separate spot, your camera plugged into a separate USB port. So there was a lot to it. It was technical and it was expensive. So there may be some special equipment that is used, or software, but again, today we have more access than we ever had before, so some of these disadvantages are going away. The fact is, it's still a flat form of learning. There's still no interactivity between me and you. I recorded this ahead of time. I talked to myself in a room. You're probably sitting by yourself in a room listening. There's no one else with you, at least not a classmate. And so it's still flat and not necessarily interactive, and that's certainly a disadvantage. Not everyone is an audio learner. The few people who are, they don't need to see anything on this slide. They just need to hear my voice. That's pretty unusual. I think, and don't quote me on the statistic off the top of my head, I think it's something like 10 or 12% of the population. So it's not totally common, but a lot of people learned in mixed media ways. Most of us do. Most of us need visual stimuli. We need words on a page, we need pictures, that kind of thing, but we also can learn with voice. So sometimes it's good to reinforce your learning with a secondary audio. Now the nice thing is you can record it pretty cheaply and inexpensively these days, and you can listen to me drone on over and over and over if you so choose, but you don't have to. And you can also fast forward to what you need and skip over the parts you don't, so that's kind of handy. But obviously, if you don't hear well, if you're hearing impaired, this is not ideal. And depending on the type of recording, it may be expensive to either record or play back. Most of the time it's not. There's podcasts now that everybody has access to. I mean, geez, you can learn a foreign language, a word a day on podcasts that you can subscribe to. So it's pretty easy and pretty handy, readily available. Unfortunately, it's the same as the last slide we were looking at, where there's still no interaction. It's pretty flat. I've recorded this, you listen to it, and that's the end. So there's no interaction. If you have a question in the middle of this, you're going to have to stop, send me an email, wait for my response, or send me a text, which a lot of you do, and that's fine. But anyway, you have to wait for me. There's no live, real-time interaction. Video learning has a lot of the same advantages and disadvantages that audio had. You still need special equipment to both record and view it. To watch it, it's generally pretty cheap. But to record it, that's where the cost comes in. So you have to have a camera to record it that you didn't have to have just to watch it. So, you know, you got to think about that. You can certainly tailor the video to your learner. And this is something that I really wanted you guys to do well, and you've gotten better at it. And we only had 2 videos. Maybe you should give me some feedback here for this, for your on your discussion board. Should I have future classes make more videos? As you'll have made 3 by the end, not counting that little introduction at the beginning. But I've tried, and I don't know if you realize this, but I've tried to have you tailor each presentation to a different learner or different learning audience. So one was for your classmates, a college course. Now we're doing one for the imaginary patient. You know, I've tried to shift this around for different audiences so that you can see that you do different things for a different audience. You may purchase prepackaged material. A lot of the textbook companies have material that we could use. And also a lot of the drug companies, a lot of the manufacturers have material that they will either give you or, you know, have you buy from them. You guys all saw stuff like this when you were in school with me. If I showed you a video about a ventilator or a certain piece of equipment, then that would be this type of learning, those prepackaged materials. Telecommunication learning resources are not used as often today as they were 20 years ago. One of the first college classes I took after I got my associate degree was an English class. It was like a English 102 kind of class, and it was a telecourse. And they put it on television in the middle of the night on the weekend and stuff. I had to set my VCR, that's how long ago it was. And I would watch these television programs. It was this prepackaged TV course that the college had purchased. And it was kind of neat. I got to watch a narrator talk me through different things. I also had a textbook that went with it. And I had to show up, I think it was 3 times, maybe 4 times during the semester to take exams. I actually had to go to the college in person and take the exam in person. But because it was an English class, there were bits and pieces of plays and poetry. So if there was a play, I got to actually see people act it out. It was kind of fun. It was not quite as flat as, say, this, for example. But there certainly was not any interaction. I mean, when I showed up to take my exam, I got to sit in a room full of people and realize they were all taking the course at the same time I was, and I couldn't tell you any of their names. So it was kind of neat. But I had to set the VCR because, again, I either had to be awake at 11:30 at night to watch this show that came on the local, you know, cable access network, or I could have gone to the library and checked it out. There wasn't the ability to find it online back then, and that was certainly a limitation. So it was fun and it was pretty handy. I had a newborn baby at the time. I think, well, maybe she was about 6 months old, and so this gave me an opportunity to go to college without finding a babysitter. I mean, I understand why people want to take online courses because I took this type of course myself. But I'll tell you what, I think I like that one better than this. But, you know, it's there. It can be complicated, and there are certainly different agencies that have to organize with one another. The college had to buy that prefabricated material, or they had to produce their own material. The college then had to find a way to broadcast it. And if they broadcast it out, I mean, think about it. They put it on the television. Anybody could have watched it. So if you ever flip through TV and you find something really weird and you can't figure out what it is, that's it. There it is. Well, computer learning. Here we are. Again, I understand why people want to do this, because you can certainly work around your schedule, and it is there's a convenience that is not available in an in-person course. You do have some interactivity. It's not as good as if you were in the room with everybody, unless you have an online scheduled course, and there are courses that do that. I have a friend who teaches at Great Basin College. He teaches a math course, and he does it live. So there's a live video of him, and he's got this program where he can write, like on a whiteboard next to his face while he's talking, and people basically Skype in, or maybe they're just on the phone. Anyway, they can ask him live questions. It's a live course, as if they were all sitting in the room together. That works really well for them because it's a rural area, and most people live 50, 60 miles away from the actual college campus. And they can't really put a satellite campus out there, because they've still got, no matter where they put the satellites, somebody's driving 100 miles. So it works wonderfully for them. It is a timed course. I mean, it's just like going to a regular in-person class. And I think that would be slightly more fun for something like this. We could all watch you give your presentations in person instead of watching the videos. But, it is what it is. There's certainly advantages and disadvantages. And I think now that you guys have almost completed this course and arts class, whether you've taken other online courses or not, you can see the advantages and the disadvantages. You certainly have to have a dependable computer, and I think almost everybody in this class has had a computer issue at some point during the semester. It was really common. I got texts from several of you throughout the course of the semester telling me you had computer issues, which I can relate to because I got a brand new computer the week before school started, so I get it. Sometimes your computer just dies. If you have financial issues, then getting a new computer is not always easy. And then what are you going to do? You're going to have to drive to the library or go someplace where you have computer access. So that's pretty difficult. It's also more difficult for the instructor to set up the material, to get this set up. It's way easier to do an in-person class than an online class. And I think just creating the presentations that you have now uploaded for each other, I think you can appreciate better how much additional work goes into putting stuff online. Because before you could put your stuff online, you actually had to write your presentations, you had to prepare your slides or whatever material you were going to prepare. You had to get all that ready. If you were in person, that's where it would have stopped. You could have used those notes, those slides, those videos that you found. You could have used those in class. That would have been the end of it. The fact that you had to package it and convert it to a video format and post it online and then send me the link so I could send the link out to everybody else, I think that having done that, you can appreciate the additional effort it takes to set up an online course. That said, it's a lot of work. We say front loading. That's what we talk about at work all the time when I'm with other educators. You have to front load an online class. Now, next year, if I teach the same class, I may or may not redo some of these videos, and so there won't be quite as much work for me in the future. But the first time you do it, it can be incredibly time intensive, labor intensive. So, what have we come down to? When you select your materials, you have to think about what you want to teach, the best design for that material and the learners. You have to think about the technical aspects of what you need and how you're going to package it. And by packaging, I mean, how are you going to give it to the public? Is it going on television? Is it going online? Will it be in person? Should it be packaged in a self-paced modules where the student is completely in charge of all the pacing, how quickly they finish? Or is it something that you want to release a little bit at a time? And then there's this nifty little pyramid, which should show you that the method you're using right this minute to learn is not the greatest. It's not the worst, but it's not the best. And that's why we add different levels of things. So actually doing something, physically turning a ventilator on and turning the knobs, that's how you will learn the most. And that's across the board. 90% of what we learn is from actually doing something, hands-on. And if you think about it, that's because you are thinking at higher level of Bloom's taxonomy. You're physically manipulating things. You're touching them with your hands. If you're kneading a loaf of bread, you can smell it and you feel it on your hands. So there's different senses that are all at work at the same time. And you get to practice over and over and over. Plus, at the same time, you're hearing people talk about it. You're having discussions with classmates. So you're using a lot of different methods of learning while you're doing things like that. Now, the presentations that you have given, in theory, at least according to this learning pyramid, the presentations you have created should result in a great deal of learning for you, the person who created it. So if you had a chapter about a disease or a disease process, like your chapter assignments, then whatever that topic was, you probably learned a lot about. You're not as likely to forget that as your classmates are who they were just watching. CAI, by the way, under that, by speaking and writing, the 70% level there, the CAI is computer assisted instruction. We use that abbreviation quite often in education. Seeing and hearing things like DVDs, television, videotapes, you learn quite a bit more than you might expect. It's like watching a documentary on television. Later on, you're going to remember, what was in King Tut's tomb if you enjoyed the presentation. Seeing things, written things, gives you 30% retention, which is more than hearing or reading alone. So several of you have created presentations without visuals, without any words on a page, and you typically, I've counted off for that. It's not that your presentation wasn't good or that you didn't have good information. On the contrary, you usually had fabulous information, but because you only presented it in one or two ways, those visual learners were left in the dark. They didn't get a chance to see or read things, they only got to hear. And we know that it's just not as effective a method for learning. And then flat out, if you read something, chances are you'll retain less of what you read than any other way of doing it. So again, strictly having someone read a textbook and nothing else, here's a handout, now learn it, it typically doesn't work. You can't expect it to.